What is up, conscious monkeys? So, this is going to be a little bit different than the way that we've done this before. This interview kind of occurred over two different recording sessions. We tried recording one time, and the first time it was honestly kind of messy. Eh, there's a couple of reasons of why it got messy. Number one is that we were talking about very real and to some people it can be a very dark conversation. So first of all, viewer discretion, that we go into like kind of sexual stuff, and it's heavy, man. Like the stuff we talk about is heavy. And quite frankly, it's so heavy that I believe that we were experiencing some interference, call it electrical interference from her, from myself. And what it was doing is it actually was kind of crashing the platform that I used to record this stuff. It was crashing her internet, and it was getting wild. On top of that, there were some dogs that were just getting animated. She has dogs, but she said that they've never acted so erratic before, outside of when we were recording. So, take it for what it is, whether you want to believe that it's a byproduct of how deep the conversation we have is. Take it for what it is. With that being said, the way that I have decided to set this up is that I will air, and I'm giving you this intro right here, and then I'm going to give you the first time we sat down. Uncut, I mean, there's going to be a little bit of snipping because I need to put the two together. I need to put the two times we talked together. But other than that, it's going to essentially be me giving an intro the first time we talked, and then me giving an intermission, and then the second time we talked. So I'll denote those with this little doo-doo-doo-doo-doo with that sound. So if you hear that, other than that time, it means that we're going into the next interview, the next break, whatever you want to call it. So with that being said, here's going to be the first one. If you don't want to listen to it, that's totally cool. You can click the link below. I'll put a timestamp as to when the second interview kind of starts, which will be inclusive. I think some things might get like jumbled over. But honestly, like it's kind of a messy conversation because, as you'll see and hear, it's hard for the brain, I think, to conceptualize like whenever these deep seated traumas occur to it. It's hard to remember the timeline, and hopefully, I believe I did the best I could to kind of keep the timeline organized. But I'll let you guys be the judge of that. So without further ado, let's get into the first time that Josephine and I recorded. So without further ado, welcome, conscious monkeys, to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. I am your host, Clayton Q. Terry. And before we get started, I've got two disclaimers today. The first one is that my dog is on the premise. She's been walked, she's been fed, so we should be all good. But if we have to take a break for some reason, she's acting up, she's being fussy, I'll let you know that we're doing a brief intermission. But I'm pretty confident that we got this one. The second disclaimer is, in our initial meet and greet with Josephine, it sounds like this episode could go to a pretty dark place. So I want everyone to just be warned, be prepared for it. And if that happens, then, it happens, and we'll try to find the light at the end of the tunnel. So stick with us. But with that being said, our guest today has helped people create the life that they want to live through traveling and her travel agency and all that. And I'm sure we'll get to it at some point in the story. But she's traveled the world and traveled the depths of her soul. Conscious monkeys, welcome to the show, Josephine. Josephine, how are you?
Hello. I love the little disclaimer. It's like, brace yourself.
I just want people to know what they're getting into.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
So Josephine, one of my favorite questions, as always, is what was the first thing? Maybe it was a parent that first asked you, maybe it was a teacher. What was the first thing you wanted to be whenever you grew up?
I actually wanted to be a singer. So
A singer.
I loved Britney Spears. I used to perform when I was younger. I used to live in like a little grove, and it's where like there's like just a load of houses in a little circle. And my mum used to get everybody in, and I'd perform Britney Spears, and I'd do a dance and a sing. So yeah, that was what I wanted to be when I was younger.
You did a lot of Britney Spears imitation?
Yeah, I loved her. She was my idol.
What was your favorite song by her?
Oh, hit me one more time. I don't even know if that's the title, but that one.
Oh yeah, it's like hit me, baby, one more.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't.
yeah,
Is that? I'd be
yeah.
interested to know if that's the actual title.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, I don't know if that's the title, but that
I'm not
song.
sure if that title could get away with in this day and age either.
No, no.
So what happened with that? Was there a reason that you stopped pursuing it, or like where did you kind of go with that?
Yeah, so it doesn't sound so extreme, but I think for me as a child, I actually went to my dad, and my dad's one of those people who's very kind of like pragmatic, very kind of like you need to do, something serious kind of vibe. And he was like really into computers. And I think he wanted me to live the life that he never lived. And he was just pushing me into computers, computers. And I think I was about 8. And I said to him, "Oh, Dad, I'm going to be a singer." He said to me, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "You need to start thinking about it now, Josephine. What do you want to do? It's important." I'm like, "I want to be a singer." And he was like, "A singer?" He's like, "You can't be a singer." And just like started saying all of these things that just ruined me basically,
Oh
as a
wow.
child. Because he was like, "Have you won any competitions?" I was like, "No." And he's like, "Right then, it's not realistic. You're not going to be a singer." And I was, it's not a realistic job. And I was like, okay, so that really shattered my confidence. I stopped singing from that point onwards, which when I think of it like now, I'm like, it doesn't seem that bad, but obviously as a child, it shattered me. So yeah, I just stopped. I guess then it's, that authority figure. I started to then mold myself to do things that were important and realistic. So
And you're
yeah,
making
just
air quotes as you say that.
yeah, quote,
Quote
quote
quote.
unquote. Yeah, yeah.
So was this just one conversation you had with your dad, or was there multiple where you try to push back and he was just like no? Or
Uh, I think the dynamic between my dad, which I think is a common dynamic for a lot of people, was I really wanted to impress him. So it's like anything he wanted me to do, I wanted to be him to be proud of me. So it was kind of like, he was really into gaming. So then I started gaming because I was like, oh, this is going to connect me and my dad. And obviously I think it's cool that my dad's a gamer, and I learned how to be a gamer because of my dad. And that was cool. But yeah, I think it wasn't really as much as a pushback. It was just me trying to impress him. So that was more the vibe.
you felt like you were trying to like validate him a little bit more,
Mm,
please the parental figure as opposed to following, I guess, what you wanted to
yeah.
do.
Yeah. Because I just didn't feel confident, I guess. So I think you think as well, parents know best. Obviously, like in hindsight, I'm like, oh, really shouldn't have. I mean, later down the line, I did actually put my dad in his place. And I did say to him, you're not living the life I want to live, Dad. So I'm not going to take advice from you anymore. I
I
did say
mean,
that later in life.
good for you.
Yeah,
Let's. Well, I guess we'll get to that at some point. Let's try to keep it back at the intro, right? Where it's,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
like, I want to be a singer. I'm, dead set on singing. Were you kind of doing this like in your basement? Were you dancing around singing, or was there like a point where like did it kind of like blindside your dad?
So my dad didn't actually live with us, but I would be singing everywhere. So there used to be a few children in the Grove, and we used to all like pretend we were like Girls Aloud, and we'd sing right in the middle of the street kind of vibe. And like, we didn't care, as children, you just don't care about stuff like that, do you? Like, we weren't scared, wasn't, afraid to sing out loud, in the back garden. We'd just always be doing it, be everywhere, any opportunity.
So you were just having fun doing it, and so
Yeah,
it to you it
yeah,
was a sign of play, and you were just like,
yeah,
if I just love doing this, I'm just going to do it and
yeah,
see what
yeah,
happens.
exactly. Just that innocence of like, oh, this is fun. I love it, and just doing that. So yeah, 100% was play.
Have you sung at all during or since then?
I always sing. I always sing in the shower. I always sing. I actually did a business mastermind last year, and on the like one of the retreats, one of the things that they wanted us to do was express ourselves. So I decided to sing because I was like, this is a really great opportunity for me to really push that limit, that comfort zone. And I did sing in front of like all of these people, and like, I mean, full on. trauma release. It felt like I cried and everything before it like broke down. Like it was powerful. But yeah, I do sing, just not publicly.
It's not, you don't press record, jump into the microphone.
No, no, I should.
I
I
mean,
should.
I'd encourage it.
Yeah.
So then I'm interested to hear about this retreat and all that, but it sounds like something that's further down in the story. So if we
Yes.
reel it back a little, your dad, so we're at the point where your dad is like, okay, you want to be a singer? You're like, yeah, I'm going to be a singer. What are you talking about? And he starts instilling this, let's say negativity, or
Mm.
negativity is probably the best word for it, pessimism into that dream. And then did that force you, what route did that force you into?
Uh, I guess it definitely did. So my dad was very, adamant on doing computers. Computers are the future. He studied like he did computer. He never went to like uni or anything, but like my auntie, his sister was a software engineer. He built computers, so he was like more into like the hardware, but I think he always wanted to have been a programmer. So it did. I started to pick computers then. I started to pick computers, but I would also pick art because there was this part of me that was so creative and expressive, that always has been there. And I think I just started to then bring myself into like the practicality because art's not a real job or, singing's not a real job. So all of those creative kind of elements to me were being suppressed because it was like, you need to do computers. So I started to pick IT and I loved IT. I loved computers, but I did pick computers then whenever I was able to. And I did it all the way up until uni. So,
So I'm curious about, you did a thing there where you said that art and creative stuff wasn't something that you could get paid for. Was that something that your dad might have also instilled in you? Like, did he ever say, okay, art things you don't get paid for, it's this logical stuff, it's this computer logic where you get the money?
I think I can't remember exactly if it was my dad. I'm sure he probably did say that those kind of things you can't make money in. I did hear that from, I feel like that was an influence that conditioned me a lot because I definitely did not think that you can make money from art and music unless you became a celebrity, like a famous singer, or a famous artist. Or I think even I'm only going to be a famous artist if I die, like that's
Oh, wow.
because that's, yeah. So a lot of those kind of programs that made me not go towards them ever really. So yeah,
You feel like that's what kept you away from going to it?
uh, probably. Yeah. Yeah,
Probably.
well, definitely.
so,
Definitely.
so then you went to college for, what was it, computer engineering?
I did computer science in university. So I know
Okay.
I don't know if it's called university in the States, but yeah, computer science. So I felt like a real nerd, and I strolled into uni like obviously my class of computer science was nerds, like the proper nerds, that was
Uh,
sitting there gaming.
I don't know if we talked about this in the meet and greet, but I was a computer engineer as well. So I know the
Ah,
type.
yeah, the type. And I strolled in
Yeah,
there like full face of makeup, like pretty fashionable, and nobody would come near me. I'm not
really.
surprised. No, yeah, no one came near me. I mean, we can get to that, but
I bet
yeah,
they were intimidated, if I was going
they
to be
they
honest.
were.
That,
Yeah, they
that
were.
was the crux of it. What do you want? You said something that you wanted to, if we want to get into it. So I'd love to get into it.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, so obviously, I felt uncomfortable because I felt like I didn't fit in university. Maybe my soul just knew that, it was like, this is not the place for you kind of vibe. But yeah, nobody would sit near me. And it was only, say, like 3 or 6 months in, I actually had became friends with a few of the people. And I asked them, why did you never sit? Because I would literally sit in the middle of a row and no one would come on it. Literally everyone, it was like, I was like, do I smile? Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Do I give off this vibe that's like not welcoming? But yeah, they did tell me that I was intimidating. Like they just, they
Right on.
didn't, I wasn't approachable. I wasn't, yeah, they were intimidated by me.
Did you ever ask them what it was that intimidated them?
uh yeah, like, some of the guys were like, you're just like a very kind of attractive girl, and it's like not what we're used to. And it's like they kind of judged me, they didn't think that I would be into those things that they were into. I mean, I then ended up playing like games with them, and we used to get on Skype and game together. And I think they just judged a book by its cover. I think that's what it was.
I mean, that's certainly something that I think we are all can be, we're all guilty
Like
of
that.
at some point in time.
100%.
100%.
100%. Yeah.
So then how did college go? You made some friends. Are you enjoying computer engineering, or was there this feeling that it wasn't all it was meant to be?
I really struggled, to be honest. And it wasn't that I didn't feel capable, but if I'm honest, I didn't feel like I was academic. Like I could have been if I forced myself to be. But I guess like I am quite strong minded. And I started to realize like, this is not how I want to live for the next 50, 60 years. Like, started to get those kind of like internal messages of like, surely I don't want to do this. It's boring, like because it was very naive why I picked computer science anyway. Like I was like, oh, I'll just be a game programmer because I love playing games, and then it's like game programming is like the hardest programming that you can do. It's like it's not that fun to program, like it's just not. And I was always wanting to do the design, so I really loved web design, and where I could actually be creative and choose colors and stuff like that. So I was enjoying that part of it. But then all of the programming stuff, I was like, God, no, this is so boring. And also at that time, like that age, so maybe I was like 18, that was when I was like probably my most depressed, I'd say, but like living this like double life of like I have to show up and I'm depressed, but I don't really know, I'm like, I don't understand that I'm depressed. So I'm just like showing up and smiling and being in these social situations. But inside, I feel, terrible and anxious and upset. And so there was like this really kind of contrasting vibe going on. But it definitely affected me in university because I sometimes wouldn't get out of bed. I wouldn't go. So a lot of the times I was falling behind because, like I said, I was like really depressed. And it's like I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just get up and go to uni? It's like a lot of that. And then I'd feel worse about myself because then I'd be behind. And yeah, so a lot of that was coming to the surface, I think, when I was 18. Like I was starting to like have this harsh reality of like, wow, I've got to be a responsible adult. Obviously never been parented to the like I didn't have those skills. I've not
Right.
had the functional life where I've got two parents that have taught me the skills that you're going to need when you become an adult. So that started to hit me big time when I was 18. So yeah,
So
I didn't really.
something
Sorry, go
interesting
on.
you said there was that you were depressed but didn't realize you were depressed.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
are you able to expand a little bit more on that?
yeah. So I probably around 14, I went on to um, like antidepressants. So I started taking medication for mental health. And it's because I was started to like self harm when I was that age. So I'd say between the ages of like 14 and 18, I was obviously suffering with lots of mental health, but I didn't quite understand it. Who does at that age? I don't think you can understand it. Um, so yeah, I think it's, still trying to show up in a normal world where you don't have much understanding. And the only understanding I've got is going to a doctor and them giving me medication and then coming home and trying to live in a world where it's like no one else is doing this. And, like it's just like you just got to show up. Like that's just what you've got to do kind of thing. So yeah, a lot of like that energy where it's like I was a bit lost, I'd say. I'm just trying to get on with it.
I thought it was going to be my dog that started barking.
It's mine.
Yeah. Uh, but something you said that was interesting, and this is something that I've seen myself whenever like looking back on things, is like in that in between age when you were saying you were 14 and you I guess because you sounds like you didn't understand you were depressed until you were 18, yet the outside world, doctors, maybe your parents subconsciously, the medication you're being prescribed was all saying, okay, you're depressed. But I guess you never made that correlation in your mind that you were depressed.
Yeah, I think it's like, you're not thinking of depression as a root problem. You're thinking in the terms of like symptoms. So you go to the doctors with this idea of like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And then they say, oh, okay, it sounds like this. Here you go. And then I guess you don't go deeper than that. It just stays on that level, and there's no inquiry. There's no introspection. You're just kind of like, oh, when is this going to go away, kind of thing. Like, how do we move past this? And then, yeah, obviously you don't move past it if you just keep taking medication. I don't think, it's like it takes something awful to, in my experience, it just always took something extreme for me to even be noticed and like seen and heard. It's like I had to go to extreme measures to be like a cry for help, to be like, when is this going to stop? Like, like that kind of extreme energy. So yeah, I think that's why, because I mean, my mum was depressed herself. She didn't understand. She was doing the same thing as me, going to the doctors, getting prescriptions. So
Just getting medication
yeah, heavily.
heavily. Do you feel like it was kind of just covering up what like was going on?
Yeah, like very numbing, and I mean, I don't, disclaimer, I'm not a medical doctor and I don't think anyone should just do this, but only when I stopped medication was I able to feel. And I mean, you already know the saying, like, you've got to feel to heal. And um, that was when I was ready. Obviously, there'd been plenty of times when I'd stopped the medication and I'd relapsed, and that's obviously not good. That was, dangerous for my health. But um, there was a time when I just drew a line and I was like, I can't feel this numb anymore. Like, it was great that the metazapine made me numb. It was fantastic because I didn't feel anything. It was great in those times when I'm extremely all over the show, and I'm feeling suicidal and I don't want to feel those feelings anymore of sadness and hopelessness. But it's not healthy. It's not sustainable. It doesn't actually help.
It's almost like treating a what is it? Treating a wound that needs stitches with a band-aid.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
getting to the root of the
that's it.
issue.
Never. It never is.
And so there's a couple things you said that I found interesting. The one of them, which open, as open as you are willing to go with it, you said there was things that I forget the exact phrasing, but you said you were calling out or you were doing drastic things to get attention along those lines.
Mm.
Do you remember what the
Mm.
first thing would have been and when it kind of would have occurred that you were trying to get this attention?
I definitely think that I definitely think my behavior in general was quite impulsive and extreme. So, like, I was definitely an alcoholic. I was definitely drinking way too much, but didn't think that it was bad because loads of people were doing it.
What age would this have
I'd
been?
started, like 14, 15. And then I did take a lot of drugs when like at 17, I started taking a lot of drugs. So again, it was covered up by, everyone's doing it. All my friends are doing it. But the extreme that I would take it to, I'd get myself in really bad situations, or I was very impulsive. Like, I'm a very impulsive person. So when you've got drugs and alcohol mixed into the equation with being impulsive and pretty reckless, it's dangerous. Um, Gosh, those dogs.
I
There's
know.
some dogs, and they
I
just
think it's
they
I
just
think it's so funny. I thought I was going to be the one with the
the one with
trouble.
the sorry
I was
guys,
thinking
it's me with the dogs.
it's no. I think it's funny because all day I was like, all right, I got to make sure I walk Copper and take Copper out and get her at the right time, and then your dogs are barking. I think it's hilarious. Uh,
Yeah, they bark at anyone that walks past. It's crazy.
oh
I
man,
don't know why. They just do. But yeah, anyway, that's, I think, my behavior in general. But I think for me, the biggest kind of like screams for help came when I like tried to take my own life, because I'd obviously hit rock bottom, and that legit felt like the only I didn't want to be here. Like I just didn't like it. I didn't like life. There was no happiness. It was like I was very low vibrational, you know? I mean, like on the scale of consciousness, I probably was at the bottom. Because I had no desire to be here anymore. It's like, to me, not being here was the best opportunity. It's like I actually fantasized. I do think I had like the suicidal ideation. It's like whenever I thought about it, it made me, obviously gave me some kind of chemical reaction, which I started to become a bit addicted to, I think. But that was the first time that people actually noticed me. Like, as in, when I say noticed, it's when they took me serious, as in, like, okay, she's struggling here. And I was just shocked that it took me to try and kill myself for to be heard, to be seen. I was just like, how? It seems crazy.
I mean, we certainly don't live in a normal world by any stretch of the imagination. Oh, did we lose her? I think we lost her, guys. All right, guys. So we're back. Dealt with some mechanical issues here on our side of things. Might have been some negative energy trying to pull us down. We were knocking on their doorstep at right when we got cut off. So hopefully that didn't change the mood too much, but I guess I'm gonna have to edit a little bit back there. But let's see what we can get into. Um, Josephine, we were just talking about how it took you getting to this place of feeling like you were not being heard, like nobody was listening to you. Um, if we do a quick overview, it sounds like you in life you wanted to be a singer, and then you were kind of pushed towards getting into computer engineering, and it sounds like in between there, you started going on medication. I believe we heard that like drugs were becoming a thing, and you started just falling down the rabbit hole in a negative fashion. Maybe we could start by rewinding a bit, because let's put this in context a little. Something that you mentioned before was that you were drinking, and drinking about as much as everyone else. Now in the United States, where I'm from, and I believe majority of the listeners are from, alcohol isn't like prevalent, I guess, until you hit the age of 21. You're not allowed. But you grew up
Yes. Yeah.
in Europe somewhere,
Yeah, in the
in the
UK.
UK, where drinking's probably a little
Yeah.
bit more frequent.
Well, I think that the teenagers would be drinking. And I guess like the place that I'm from is like it's pretty low vibrational. As in, there's a lot of like, people who are just on benefits, people who have like very low vibrational, I'd say. There's lots of crime, lots of, parents that are just, I'd say, dysfunctional. There's not a good energy there. So I think that also, like, we see loads of our parents drinking and partying, and then it's like that's just what we think is good to do. Um, we think it's normal in the UK to be drinking at that age, like all of the kids in the parks.
It's just culturally accepted.
Yeah, yeah, it's the norm.
And so then you're drinking a little bit. Was the medication that you got put on, was that getting supplemented with the drinking as well?
Yeah, yeah. I just had no concept of how that would be damaging to me. And actually, when you were just re-saying though that overview back to me, I was like, oh, we've missed out quite a few chunks of like, why was I depressed at 14? Why was I self-harming at 14? Why did I feel all of those ways? And like I did experience some traumatic things. It's not just that I just woke up one day, self harmed. I think that was my response to the depression and all of that, that was my response to the traumatic events that had happened. Um, and as well, like my parenting was not the most ideal. I lived in quite toxic environments. Um, so yeah, just to add some context there, because it just sounds like I've gone from being this happy child to this depressed person with no reason.
So maybe it was good we had a second to step back.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it was.
Jump down the rabbit hole real fast.
Yeah,
Her
yeah.
dad said she wasn't allowed to sing, and then she ended up trying to kill herself. Whoa.
Yeah, God, she's dramatic. Yeah.
So you, and again, if you feel like these are questions that are going to push you a little too far, feel free to, be vague if you'd like. What were some traumatic events that I'm assuming would have occurred between, that singing, that passion for singing, and then by the age of 14?
Yeah, so I'd say that around I was bullied a lot as well. It's probably a good point to add. I was bullied a lot for the way that I looked. So I mean, I think that this is a very vital bit of information because on top of the bullying and feeling not included and very rejected by society, um, when I was around 11, um, me and my little sister discovered that we were both being abused by our stepfather. Just to add another layer to that, this is also the guy that had been our father. He'd looked after us. He was a better father to us than my actual dad. Like at the time, he was. He cooked for us, he cleaned for us. He was the only parent figure that we had because my mum was in bed a lot. So she was like severely depressed, obviously had all of her own issues going on. So she wasn't able to look after us. So it's like we had a very emotionally vacant mum and a mum that wasn't nurturing us and a mum that didn't do, quote unquote, the normal mum stuff. Um, so our stepdad was our only parent figure. He would literally look after us so much. But in the same time, he was abusing us sexually. Sorry, I should mention that as well. Not necessarily physically, but he so me and my sister discovered that when she was 9 and I was 11, and I think one of the one of the most traumatic things was us building up the courage to tell our mum and thinking that our mum was going to protect us and that that was the bravest thing to do. Um, and what happened was our mum actually let him back in to the house like 2 weeks later, and then we had to start living as if none of that had happened, and we had to. I mean, at the time, we told the police that we were lying because we'd been emotionally blackmailed into like, you don't want him to go to prison. What if he goes to prison? He's going to get beat up. And we were like, oh, we don't want that, because we loved him. He was like the person who'd been looking after us. And I guess like at that age, he's so naive. Like you just don't know. You don't know these things, do you? So we were just like, I guess, didn't realize the impact that would have on us. Um, so yeah, obviously that is severely traumatic as a child. Like that's quite a lot to then live with somebody who's abused you and be terrified. But also for me, it was my mum, how she'd neglected us. That hit me hard. Um, yeah, go on.
So two questions that come to mind is number one, was your stepfather the one who pushed you towards computers, or was that was your actual dad?
That was my actual
Okay,
dad.
that was your actual
Yeah,
dad. And then the other
yeah.
question is you said twice that you discovered you were being abused. What, like, I guess I understand what you're saying from an extent, right? Like, kids have this euphoric, everything's possible idea of the world and everything's beautiful in a sense.
Mm.
And I'm curious as to how, uh, I guess that it came across to you as, uh, I'm struggling for words, but almost like that you weren't that there was a time where this was happening and it wasn't abuse, it just was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was normal.
Yeah, because you
Yeah,
were like, we
yeah,
discovered.
because it was like, what's the right word to use? Covert? Is that the right word? Where it's like under.
Covert.
I'm not sure if that's. Yeah, it was kind of like it was secretly being done, even to us. It's like it was. It wasn't intrusive. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't like pinning us down. It was very kind of like he would touch us in obviously inappropriate areas and almost pass it off as if that was normal. So then it was more uncomfortable because it would be, we would just be sit there watching TV and he would do it, but in a way that felt very like it wasn't like it's not like a obvious thing, but obviously it felt very uncomfortable and it was felt wrong, as wrong as it can feel as a child when you don't really understand those things. um so yeah, and I honestly don't know what pushed me and my sister was 9. It's like I think that we cried our eyes out. We obviously knew it wasn't right. And we just held each other and just cried our eyes out for ages, because we were just like, is this happening to you? And it's like, yeah. And then, yeah, we just embraced each other because we didn't know, it's just like, you just don't know those things. So yeah, it was that. It was very kind of like under the radar. But even if from his perspective, I think that he was trying to pass it off as if it was normal. So that was more conflicting for us because we were like, is it, like what's going on? It's a
Yeah.
bit intense.
You're sitting there like this feels wrong, but he's acting like it's normal. So you
Yeah.
honestly you get like this mix of feedback somehow, like this disgruntling of a
It's
sort.
exactly. Yeah, it felt uncomfortable to be touched, in those areas by my stepdad. It felt uncomfortable, but there was no, yeah, it wasn't weird from his perspective. Like he didn't act as if that was weird what he was doing. So then that was challenging. Yeah.
And in a weird way, it's I guess it's gosh, I can't believe I'm about to say that. But it's a I guess a good thing that you had your sister that you're able to share these ideas with. Was there ever
Oh, good.
yeah. Was there ever an inkling to share these with other friends and see if they had experienced similar things?
No, no, there wasn't. Um, no, absolutely not. Just my sister, and I guess like, so he has a lot of children, like 11 or something like that. And
Wow.
yeah, and one of those was my little brother. And my little brother, God bless his soul, he is, he was his actual son. So that was really challenging for us to be in that dynamic as well with, because yeah, we just, like, are we going to tell him? Like, he's younger than us. And we actually did kind of like agree not to tell him. But then my mum went and told him anyway at 12 years of age, which must have been so shattering for him. And he didn't believe us. He didn't want to believe that his dad had been doing that to his sisters. I think that messed him up big time. That must have messed him up big time to like lose his dad and then also find out that. So no, we didn't necessarily go and tell other people because we already had to tell his other 11 kids, and they did not treat us very well. They didn't believe us, so they just rained down on us like all of this abuse. We're liars, we're attention seekers, we're, like, I mean, it doesn't get much worse than what we went through, me and my little sister, because we told the police the first time it came out. We told the police, we told our mom, we thought, oh my God, like we're relieved. We're going to, this is going to be resolved. And then within 2 weeks, he was back in. We were told that we have to tell the police we were lying and attention seeking. We had to tell all of the kids that had just abused us, that we were lying. And then we had to just get on with life. And that's,
So so there's quite a few things here that you just laid out, and I've kind of lost track with whenever all this happened. Right? There's you telling your mom. And I'm proposing this back to you, so you're able to kind of set the timeline for me. There's you telling your mom. Well, I guess there's it happening. There's then you talking to your sister. There's you telling your mom. There's you telling police. There's you
Mm-hmm.
telling your um, uh, other somewhat siblings, the other 11 kids,
Yeah.
and then you having to go back through and say that you were lying to all those people. Are you able to kind
Mm.
of structure the timeline a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think me and my sister had the conversation, and then within the 24 hours, we went and told my mum. So this was when I was 11 and my sister was 9. And then from that point, we rang the police straight away. And then the police came and they obviously took statements in that time. That's when everybody else found out. And because he'd obviously moved out as well. And then I'd say it was about 2 weeks after that, mum started disappearing and like sneaking out of the house and stuff. And we was like, what's she doing? And, mum never leaves the house. Mum never is out of bed. What's she doing? And then we discovered that she'd been going and visiting our stepdad. And then, yeah, and then he moved back in. And so then it was all like, I'd say it was within a month of us it coming out, us telling the police and all of that. And then within a month, it was like, right, okay, now you're going to tell everyone that you were lying and that you're attention seeking, and he's going to come back and we're all going to play happy families.
Wow.
So yeah,
Was it your mom who pressured you to like say that you were lying?
she did say to us that, like if he goes to jail, he's going to get beat up. And, do we want that? Um, And my mum's experienced a lot of trauma in her life as well, and same dynamic. She was abused, and she's had the same dynamic as well, where she was told to, lie. And I think for her, it was probably felt normal. Probably felt, I don't judge her or blame her for anything. Um, but I think she was probably just shocked as well. My mum's not. She's not very grown up in her mind. She's trapped in a young traumatized girl body.
I always like Rick and Morty. It's there's a scene or an episode where Morty, who's the kid, I'm not sure how familiar you are, but
Yeah, I know Rick and
yeah,
Morty. Yeah,
and where he has the Gazorpazorp kid, like this kid ages within a day to become like a teenager, and he's like, "Dad, I'm so confused," and he's like, parents are just kids having kids, and I
yeah,
think
it's so
that's
true.
the craziest thing about it, right? And it
Mm,
sounds,
it's
yeah,
yeah. Mm.
and so yeah,
So
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, so like that was obviously very traumatic for me. That's like what I think that kind of dynamic was probably what started to trigger those feelings of like, because at 11,
Sure.
learning that my mom, who is my protector and my everything, wasn't there to protect me anymore. That I think that started a lot of like for me internal noise of like I was so confused, so let down, so confused, just yeah, didn't feel protected.
And I mean, talk about not being able to speak your truth. Like you were, and
Mm,
maybe that's something to still
mm,
touch on. It sounds like it wasn't very overt whenever you were told to lie, but it was kind of more just suggested to redact your statements or to say that you were making it
mm.
up.
Yeah, so I mean, having to tell the police that you were lying and that you were attention seeking, that was so invalidating for us. It's like, what? So it's just not real? That's not
Might have been
like a
traumatizing
bit
in
in
its
my
own right.
mind. So traumatized. I think my sister actually, like, bless her, so it actually happened to her again. And that was like the final straw when he got kicked out and he never came back. Um, but what happened to me in that time was I then also was like, I think it was like 2 years later, then I was raped by my friend's big brother. And that was that, I guess, like at that point, I'd become so um, desensitized to if something was wrong because I was like, well, even if something is wrong, no one's going to believe me. No one's gonna validate that. And I had to. That's when I started self harming. So to give the timeline, that was when 14
Wow.
I started self harming, and that I had no explanation for why I was self harming, but obviously now I can see that it was because of all of that trapped emotion and trapped feelings and not being able to speak my truth and yeah, just all of that dysfunction
I
that was
mean, it's a
going on.
lot. It's a lot of dysfunction. It's a lot of trauma in a couple years.
Yeah, yeah, it was. And I think that's then what that created the grounds for my years of depression and anxiety and identity, just not knowing who I am and feeling lost and not trusting the world and yeah, just relationships being so dysfunctional and just everything. I mean, if you learn those things as a child, you're pretty screwed.
It's
You've
ingrained.
got some challenges ahead.
You gotta rewrite that subconscious brain. It's a
Yeah,
tricky one. It doesn't
yeah.
always want to listen either.
No, it doesn't.
And so do
It
you
doesn't.
so this incident where with your friend's brother, was that would have been before you were 14?
Yeah, yeah. That was before I was 14, and nobody believed me. Again, nobody. There was girls who knew it was true, but their parents had told them to stay quiet and not get involved. So it just felt like that nightmare all over again, where like no one's gonna hear me now, that no one's gonna validate what I've been through. And I mean, as a child, I wouldn't have been aware of that, but I just had to get on with it. If actually I had to move school because the amount of abuse I got verbally threatened, like I got threatened to be beaten up because I was spreading lies, and I mean it was awful. It was for me as a child. I think it was awful. But yeah, just that rejection when I'm going through these things. That was I just can't. You can't process that. You just can't process that.
I mean,
Um,
it's hard to process even now. I mean, and even just sitting across from you, I mean, it's it's a lot for me, and to imagine it's you, you know.
mm.
And so
But it's made me who I am. So it's beautiful in a way. It's so beautiful. But obviously, when you come from it from that perspective, it sounds quite dark and deep and like, oh my god. But it's been
you,
beautiful. It's been a beautiful
my
blessing.
favorite quote is a Carl Jung quote. It's that no tree can reach its leaves into heaven without its roots reaching down to hell.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And so, if we jump back a little bit, you were saying that in school,
Mm,
they were saying that you were a liar or that you were lying. What, I
mm.
mean, point blank, I guess, were you, or were they making up things that you were lying about, or what was what
I
was that whole
think
thing?
I think it was just his sister was in my year. She was in
Whose
my
sister?
classes. So she did the guy that had done
Oh,
it.
okay.
So she just didn't want to accept that her brother had done that. You know, of course she wouldn't. Who would want her to feel like that was true? No one. And then she was popular. She was a popular girl, so she, nobody wanted to go against her either. Everyone was like, I wasn't as popular as her, so everybody just didn't want to fall out with her. So everyone was like, yeah, we're going to team up with her. Yeah, you're a liar. It's not true. And yeah,
Wow. And it sounds like it just kind of re-cemented those nobody listens to me and just kind of the distancing in a sense.
yeah. I guess it's like I was never able to, if people had have considered it was true, then maybe I would have been able to have expressed, like maybe I would have been seen or heard, or there would have been. I mean, I did go to a counsellor, like a counsellor who helped me. I spoke through things like speaking therapy, um, so I did kind of get a little bit of help at that time. Um, but yeah, then that I don't know, like I just didn't think that helped me that much because it never really gets to the root of things, does it? It's just like you tell them what's happened and tell them how you feel, and then that's it.
I mean, and
At
that's
14, I
and it
didn't.
seems like almost an extension of the whole medical situation where it's just, just these patches, it's just like, hey, like, here's how I feel. And they are looking at a checklist of okay, well, we'll prescribe you this if you check all these boxes, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I actually remember they would just constantly be saying like, "We'll get you to see a psychologist," and I think I remember at the time being able to see a psychologist was like the, if I get to see a psychologist, this is going to help me so much, kind of, you know. And I was like, just one day, and then it's like it never happened until I tried to kill myself. So it was like I was waiting and waiting, and I was on waiting lists, and you'll get to see one soon, and it was never urgent. It was never like, it was never like what you're going through is valid enough to be seen by a psychologist. So that's what I was saying before about I was only seen when I went to the extreme measures of trying to kill myself. That was only the time when people were like, oh, oh, this is serious. She's actually struggling. Um, and then even that experience, oh God, it was awful because I went into the hospital and they sent me home after like 4 days. And I mean, of course, I went back into my own little uni apartment and then I was alone and I tried to do it again.
Well, okay,
Of
I
course.
think we just covered a lot of things right there. So let's unpack all this because that was wild.
Yeah, let's unpack.
Very interesting, I guess is a better word for it. So you were like on a waiting list then to get. Oh, we lost her again. Okay, so I know that was chaotic and crazy. If you guys listen to that, first of all, thank you so much. That's pretty dope. That's pretty dope that you're willing to push through that. So now we're gonna move into the second time that Josephine and I sat down, and yeah, it's kind of a bizarre start because I already knew where I wanted to take the interview, which I normally don't know. So it's kind of rough at the beginning, but then we kind of get into it. It hits its stride and it starts moving along. So I really don't have much to add here. Just that this was the intermission in between us recording. So about a month or two was in between this for so many various reasons. The Earth and world just kept pushing us back. But here it is, the full interview, the second part of it with Josephine. So without further ado, welcome to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. I am your host, Clayton Q. Terry. On today's show, we're trying again for round two with our guest. We tried a little while back, but the energy of the conversation was getting the dogs and both of our setups all wound up. And the recording software was crashing. And you may be asking yourself, like, why would that happen? Well, Josephine and I are diving into a very real, very deep, and depending on how you view it, a very dark conversation. She's had a very unique path to get where she is today to join us for this conversation. So, Conscious Monkeys, welcome to the show, Josephine Mullally. Josephine, thanks for being here.
Hi. Again, round two.
Again, round two.
Yeah,
We'll get it figured out this time.
this is the one.
Keep the
This
energy
is this is
clear.
the deep breaths if needs be.
We'll take a break if the internet starts
Yeah.
acting up again. Um so I guess let's try to keep it consistent, right? So like what was the first thing that you wanted to be whenever you grew up?
Yes, I wanted to be a singer. A singer. I wanted to be specifically Britney Spears. Um, but yeah, if you would have asked me, a singer. That's all I did when I was younger.
Just a lot of singing, dancing around.
Singing, dancing. Yeah,
Was there kind of
yeah.
like a lot of
Expressing myself.
was there a lot of imitation of Britney?
Yeah, yeah. Hit me one more time. That was my weekly performance.
Oh, man, that's funny. That's cool. And so then,
Mm.
did you like pursue this passion at all? Did you make any music videos, or what was the extent?
No, so me and the other kids, there was a few of us. We would like sing a lot. But when I was like 8, my dad was just like put, the whole reality check on me and was like, what do you want to be? obviously from a place of care, but he was starting to kind of like program me to be ready to for the real world.
Air
In quote
quotes.
quote.
Yeah, I can see you're making air quotes.
Yeah. And it was very kind of like, okay, what are you gonna do as like your real job? I'm like, I'm gonna be a singer, of course,
You're like, I don't know what you're talking
of
about.
course.
It's already
Yeah,
decided.
I'm gonna be a singer. And he's like, no, like absolutely not. Like, that's not realistic. You're not gonna be a singer. Um, and just came crashing down on those dreams, I guess. And it doesn't sound crazy now. Like it sounds quite like when I look at it now, I'm like can see it from like a rational, reasonable view. But then it was devastating. I just couldn't believe that I don't know, like I just it was my first experience of having kind of like a something crashing down on my reality, like me as a child being in a bubble. As a child, it's like you're very imaginative. Nothing is stopping you. You can do anything. You can take on the world. And that was like my first, I guess, real like traumatic experience of someone just popping a bubble and being like, like conditioning me. And it's like, oh, so no, that quickly ended. The dream quickly ended there. That was it. No more singing from that point.
That's wild. I really like how you describe that of, like when you're a kid, like everything's possible, anything's possible.
Mm,
And it was just kind of like this bubble that popped. It sounds like you
yeah,
put your dad in like really high regards with regards to like approval. I mean, and I assume most people do, but just that's what it sounds like.
yeah, a lot. Everything. I think more so than my mum. I don't know why. But everything that I've done is always like wanting my dad to be proud of me. So yeah,
Did you, did your mom say anything about this? Did you bring this up to her of what you wanted to do?
mum was more encouraging actually. Mum was like, you can do anything you want. What maybe too passive? Mum was yeah, you can do anything you want. I don't know how invested she was into that. It's just like yeah, you can you can do it. It's like okay, but yeah, no, she very passive. So very mild and passive. It's not like, go on, go do it. It's very like, do whatever you want.
Just like the world's your oyster kind of thing. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and so then whenever you're like, okay, you can't be a quote unquote can't be a singer, what was the next thing that kind of popped into your head?
Well, it was what Dad suggested, which was computers. I think my dad grew up in a time where, like you had to work hard and you had to provide for your family. And, he obviously struggled. So for him, it was like he wanted me to have the best opportunities. And I mean, we'll get there, but later on in life, he explained all of it to me. So, yeah, he just was like, you need to do computers, that's the future. Um, he built computers. His sister was a software engineer, my auntie. So it was very kind of like that's where the money is. That's where you're going to be supported. That's where you're going to have a stable, secure income. That's where you need to go. So then that's what I did. Computers.
At the age of 8?
Well, that was like what I started playing computer games.
uh,
So that's how it started. I started getting an interest for computer games and being on a computer a lot. And yeah, so then the opportunity, as you go through school, like picking computers, that was the choice.
it was just, yeah, absorb as much computer information as you can and dive into that.
Yeah. Well, from 8, I was starting to think that that's what I was going to do. So it was like I was preparing myself for that.
Okay. And then, I guess as a parallel, as we're kind of going through this, I know that you're like into spirituality and consciousness. Did you have any, like, were there any talks with your parents or mom, dad about the nature of being and, what all is happening?
No, no, not really. And it's like my parents are, as a lot of parents, are not parents that have like done the work, gone inwards, become very conscious. So it's not that energy really.
Gotcha. It wasn't like a part of the conversations.
No.
And so then, um, I guess I'm having a little bit of difficulty since we kind of talked about this before, but I remember at some point, probably around 8 or 11, did your parents they separated, and then did your mom remarry
No, so my dad actually moved. My dad left when I was 3.
when you were 3?
So yeah, so my dad left when I was 3, and my stepdad came in around the same time, I think, or like 4. So it was like dad went out, stepdad came in pretty soon
Oh wow!
after that, and then he was my dad. So like he brought me up, taught me the alphabet, and all of those things.
And that's you're saying your stepdad it was your dad, was your quote unquote dad?
No, so like not the dad that told me to do computers. That's
Oh,
like my
okay,
real
that was
biological father. Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, but stepdad was like the father figure more so because my real dad was pretty like flaky. Like he just wasn't consistent, wouldn't always pick us up. He was supposed to get us at like every Sunday, sometimes wouldn't show up. So it was a bit like wasn't a huge part of our lives growing up.
Gotcha. Yeah, he was kind of in and out, let's say.
Mm, mm.
And so I I'm not sure why I'm blanking. I feel like there's a block here of the questions that I want to ask. Do you feel that as well?
Yeah, it's probably because we spoke about it, and it's one of those things. It's like you feel like it's not flowing as naturally because you've spoken about it again. But I think that you just whatever's coming into your intuition,
Okay.
whatever wants to come in.
Okay. So I guess let's just I guess try to just push in and jump into the rough stuff, the conversations that are difficult to have, because that's where I want
Yeah.
to take this, but I'm feeling blocks to get there. Um,
Mm,
so what's a good question to kind of lead us there? maybe maybe let's start when because I know that let's set it up a little bit, I guess, because I know that there was a little bit of struggle regarding sexual trauma in your childhood. Um, stuff that I know a lot of people go through, but maybe you experienced it a little bit more heavy than most.
mm.
Would- Did you realize? Was it not till like later in life that you realized that this was sexual trauma and something that wasn't right, or was this something that you kind of knew sooner than like let's say 10, 15 years down the road?
I I honestly think that on a subconscious level, when I was like 13, 14, I I think that it started to dawn on me that like something had happened and it disturbed my spirit and my it had disturbed something, something wasn't right because I mean what kid, teenage, like young kid, I'm not even a teen, am I a teenager? Yeah, I'm a teenager at 13, 14. But what kid starts self-harming when they've not seen that? It's like there's something that's coming up there that I'm not even conscious about. Like I can't even really understand why I'm doing something like that. So for me, I think that that's when I learned that there's something trying to be expressed. And I don't know if you've ever heard or spoke to someone about self-harm, but I'll explain it from my perspective. Like self, when I used to cut myself physically, it used to relieve emotional pain. It felt very satisfying for me. And I know that sounds weird, and people could never understand why I enjoyed self harming, but it would be a temporary relief of like, it's strange, but like the physical pain would take away the emotional pain. It almost was so weird that that was like my coping mechanism, and that's what it was essentially. So I knew at that point when I was just doing that, and I'd had no prompts, I'd not learnt that from anywhere, I'd not seen that something was not okay. Like
that's not normal.
Right. That there's like something you're trying to express almost. It's almost like the way it's resonating with me is that the energy was kind of built up inside of you, and the only way to
Yeah,
let it out was to physically bleed from it.
it's, when you put it like, it's like it's symbolic for that. It's like a way of being able to express something, let something out. And if you think about my experience with the sexual abuse, it happened. And when it happened, and when me and my sister discovered it together, what happened was we then told my mum and we came out about it because we were like such young children, like 9. My sister was 9, I was 11. From that point, we told my mum because we're like, our mum is going to protect us, surely. And then we were told to basically say that we'd lied. So if you think about that, we're suppressing that. So that's like, it makes sense then that I wanted to express.
So I mean, maybe let's run through the timeline. Well, two things I'm thinking of is number
Yeah,
one, I think I'm going to have to put in our original conversation at the beginning of this because it's, to give people maybe credence. So feel free to repeat stuff, feel free to um, kind of go over that stuff again because I might have forgotten. Um, but maybe let's take a second to appreciate the timeline of how we got to self harming, right? You're saying it was at the age of 13. And let's say in between the ages of 3, let's say, and 13, what I've pieced together is that there's a couple things that occurred. One would have been, sexual abuse. One would have been being told to lie and being told by your parents that lying is the right thing, or your mom, I guess, specifically, that lying was the right thing to do, and then self harming. So could you lay out a little bit of a timeline so that we're able to understand?
yeah, yeah. So I would say that, like, generally, my life as a child, I remember a lot of happy memories. Like, I remember playing, I remember being imaginative, creative. So, my life generally was pretty good, as in, I don't, I'm not conscious of like it being bad as such. Like, lived in a very kind of like first world poverty, um, kind of like no money. So that was a struggle. There would often be times where we didn't have, say, like just resources. But I guess like my childhood was, I remember a lot of happy memories, really. But there is obviously a lot of things that are, not functional. Let's just use the word functional because I feel like that's a good word to use. Not functional. And then it's like when I guess like for me that the most life changing event that happened was when I was 11 and when my sister was 9. So that's like when things just just took this huge 180 and was like, whoa, like I had to grow up. So that's like the most significant part of me transitioning into this whole new life or reality of like, whoa, this is insane. um the abuse actually had been going on for, um it must have started when I was like 10. So the abuse had obviously already started. And so yeah, so I mean, timeline, that the abuse had happened and was happening. And when I was about 11, that's when I then came out and told my sister. So that actually had been going on for, I mean, it's so hard to have specific, like, I don't know the dates exactly, but I just remember that it was normalized. It was like a normal thing that was happening. Um, from so my stepdad was the person who was looking after us. I should probably add that in. My stepdad was the person who was taking care of us. He was taking us to school. He was cooking for us. My mum was in bed a lot of the time. So my mum is like really depressed. She's got loads of like things wrong with her mental health, and physically she's got a load of things as well. So my mum's coping mechanism is to just sleep and avoid everything. And when I say that we thought that was normal, we had friends come round after school one time at 3 p.m. and they would be like, "Where's your mum?" We were like, "She's in bed," thinking nothing of it. And they would be like, "That's weird." We were like, "What?" And then it was only when we would go to friends' houses and their mums are like doing things and they're up and cleaning and cooking, and we would be like, "Is it our mum that's weird or is it their mum that's weird?" Like legit, legit. That's that's how normalized it was for our mum to be in bed. So that's kind of the dynamic. Was like my mum was predominantly in bed her whole life, and our stepdad was the person that was there parenting us and obviously grooming us at the same time, but not funny, but like, nervous laugh. It sounds mental, but it is, I guess. It's a little bit mental.
I mean, there's a lot of things in life that are crazy. So I mean,
Yeah,
I get it, and I think the laughing, for instance, like I know I laughed a little bit there. I think it's kind of just that emotional release of not really
yeah,
sure what to say or how to process things, and it's kind of just like this laughing, just as a way to for your body to kind of shake out those
yeah,
feelings.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
So
And it's my coping mechanism as well, laughing. So, like even pain turns into laughter. So I've learned how to transmute it into laughter. It's so strange.
that's interesting. I mean, because I know when
Yeah,
you laugh, you release like a lot of happy chemicals, which
yeah,
maybe there's a
yeah.
weird, not a weird, weird is such a weird word. Um, maybe there's some sort of mental connection there with like, pain and then trying to compensate by laughing in effect. So,
Yeah,
so let me at least try to tell you your story back to you based on how I understand it. Correct me where I'm
yeah,
wrong.
yeah. Let's do it.
So, age of 3, your biological dad kind of moved out. And roughly around the same time, this new guy moved in, which is a little interesting. Do you know how your mom would have met this new guy if she was just bedridden majority of the time?
Well, there's stories, and I don't know which story is true. I've also learned that adults lie. Adults don't
Yeah.
like to tell the truth. And honestly, the amount of different stories I've heard from mum and dad just have completely different stories, and none of them tell the like. I don't know who's telling the truth, and I say to them, I don't care. I just want to know the truth. I don't care who's wrong or right or any of this. But as you know, um, there was one story, and I think there is truth in this. I think did my mum admit this? My mum actually started to have like an affair with my stepdad. And no, no, no. So it gets more messed up than this. No, I need to tell you. My dad's sister was going out with my stepdad. So my auntie was going out with my stepdad.
Your
And my mum,
okay, so your aunt was going out with your now stepdad before he was your stepdad,
yeah, so my dad
your dad.
was going out with my mum,
Okay.
and my dad's sister was going out with my stepdad.
Okay. I see.
Pretty messed up.
Yeah. That's
It's a
interesting.
bit much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the story that I know and I feel is true is that they, my stepdad and my mum started to cheat on my dad with my stepdad, and my stepdad cheated on my auntie with my mum. So I think that's how it all kind of happened.
Well, and what I find very fascinating, and we'll get to this point in the story, is I know it's a certain point in the story your mom starts telling you to lie about the kind of the sexual stuff that came. And
Mm,
to me, it's this is all sounding like pure projection of essentially the situation that they bestowed upon you. It was like, hey, we lied about our sexual past. Now we want you to do the
yeah,
same and continue that, let's say, negative, bad karmic loop of some sort.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Mm, mm.
um, so let's see here. You were 3 years old. Um, they, let's say, decided your biological dad left, your stepdad then moves in. Do you remember times when your mom would have been out of bed, or was it mostly just she was pretty much bedridden?
Yeah, like no. So when I was mum was up. Mum was up when we were really younger, so probably around between the ages of like 3. So when I moved to the UK, because I'm from Ireland originally, so I moved to the UK when I was 3. So between 3 and like 8, mum was pretty awake and active, and she would be up and stuff. But because mum was taking speed, so mum was taking, I don't know what speed. I don't know if it's called speed. I don't know what the actual terminology is for it.
I know it is speed.
Um,
I don't know what the chemical name is, but
okay, so it is called
yeah.
speed. Cool. Um, so mum took speed, and that was the thing that made her do things. So you'd always know when mum was on speed because she would be cleaning the house, she'd be up, she'd be cooking, she'd be operating. But then the crash from the speed was 3, 4 days in bed. So it was kind of like that cycle. So I remember her, she used to party a lot with her friends. I do remember like snippets like this where she would be partying. And my mum was young. Let's not forget my mum had me when she was 18. So she was a young mum. Um, I don't think she ever got to go and live her life. Um, so yeah, mum was up in those occasions. I remember that, like, but she predominantly was in bed, and we really would be knocking on and mom, can you get up? Can you get up? Like, this would be me and my sister all of the time. Mom, can you get out of bed? Like, we wanted her to be there and look after us and have her presence. Like, it was neglect. It was very neglectful emotionally. She's just very vacant.
Do you feel like that you took over, maybe not at this point, but did you feel a sense of responsibility for your sister
Yeah,
to fill that role?
yeah. I was mum. I did take on mum role. I did, and responsibility is one of the biggest struggles I've had in life. I feel emotion coming up. It's okay. um, I really struggle with taking on responsibility for everyone around me, and that's like really heavy. I'm really good at letting emotion flow now. Can you see this? um, it's really affected me, you know, to be like the person who's always responsible for people, the person who's like I really struggle with responsibility, but in a beautiful way. I am so good at taking responsibility, like too good. Very good at being like dropping my ego, taking responsibility in situations, knowing when I'm like to blame or to like need to own my stuff. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in a way. Um, but yeah, I took on one role for sure. And then especially when the sexual abuse came out, it was like even more. It was like, right, mum's not protecting us, so I really am the one looking after us now.
and,
Yeah.
and so I'm trying to remember how that all rolled out in our earlier conversations, but from what I remember, and I'd love for you to clarify because again, I'm going to put those interviews at the beginning of this. What it was that the kind of the sexual abuse started, I think, before you were 10, and then it kind of got normalized around the age of 10 or 11. Um, did you first realize that this was happening to your sister as well, or did you realize that something was wrong before then?
I guess it was happening to me, and I probably, as a protective measure, because I'm the oldest, I was probably thinking, I need to find out if this is happening to my sister. She's younger than me, I need to care for her and protect her. And that's kind of like whatever came over me because it was very, I went into my sister's room and was like, is this happening to you? And she said, yeah. And then we kind of, we embraced each other and we just cried and hugged each other for so long. I just can't even imagine how two young children have that capacity to connect on something like that. It's so crazy to me now. Just I can just see us as two little children hugging about something so huge and knowing it's wrong, but not quite knowing the depth of how wrong it is. You know how big it is, how impactful that's going to be on us. Um, so yeah, that's I guess that it was just an urge from me to be like, is this happening to my sister as well? And that's then, yeah.
Was that the like epiphanic moment of this is wrong? Like, did you reconcile that it was wrong before, or was the thought process more along the lines of like, wait, what if he's doing this to my sister as well? Wait, I wouldn't want this to happen to my sister. Like, how did that kind of mentally, like, the
Mm,
wrongness versus like it being your sister? If that makes sense.
yeah. So it felt wrong. So when he was doing it to me, it felt wrong. I felt uncomfortable, but it was done in a very kind of like covert way. It wasn't done intrusively. It was very just just weirdly done, like it was normal. You know, it was like the way that he would touch me was almost as if it's okay that I'm touching you like this. You know, it's not strange that I'm touching your hair. So my own body, my own intuition knew that it was wrong because my body felt weird. But as a child, I couldn't intellectually understand why it was weird, you know? Because I'm like, I'm a child. How do I know that that's wrong? I don't know that that's wrong as a child. So I was just going off my intuition, I guess. Like my body felt repulsed, you know, my body would be rejecting that I would be wanting to get away from him in those situations. So I guess that's enough for me to know that it was wrong as a child. That was enough.
And so, yeah. And so then, if we keep the timeline going, you kind of like talked with your sister,
Mm.
you guys embraced. Was there, what was kind of like the next measure after that? Was there a pull to say something to your mom? What was the next, like, okay, he's doing this to my sister as well. Something's wrong here. We need to do something. What was that next something?
Well, I think that was as children trying to decide what do we do next? What are we supposed to do? And we actually were really scared. We were like, we don't know what to do. We don't, and we were like, that's when we came to the conclusion, surely the only thing to do is tell mum. Like, we have to tell mum. And we were like, oh, I don't know. Like, we don't know. I guess we just didn't understand. We were just scared of like what that would mean. Um, but we did come to the agreement, right? The next step is to tell mum. And yeah, I think, did we tell like mum's friend first? Maybe we did. Maybe we told mum's friend first, and maybe she helped us to tell mum. I can't remember the actual facts and logistics. That is such a messy time of my life, but we did end up telling mum basically. And yeah,
Yeah. And if I
do you want
remember,
to?
yeah, I guess I want to point out what I remember, because in my mind, I'm trying to keep it all organized myself. I mean, it's a crazy situation to first of all, to even recall, right? Like I personally, I mean, I've kind of experienced sexual trauma, not to the extent that you did it by any measure, but like there's a weird thing where it's like kind of hard for your brain to like remember, was that how this happened? Was that how this happened? Did that
Yeah,
happen next?
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
and so then you, if I remember in the story, you went to your mom, you told her, um, at that point, did she tell you to lie? Because I thought there was also like a situation where you went to the police, and then that's when,
yeah.
is that when you were told to lie?
So what happened was we told mum. She obviously, like, because the mum's friend had been involved as well, the police were rang, and it was kind of like, oh, like, this is wrong, he needs to go, like, kicked out. We rang the police, we give statements, like, it all was coming out, and he was gone, and mum was kind of like, I think mum legit was just shell shocked. Like, when I'm thinking about having a visual of her at that time, I think she just didn't know what to do. Um, So we rang the police, we told them, we gave statements. It was like a whole thing that it was like, oh, we're like, this is all happening. Like it's all being resolved almost. Like, and then, and then mum started disappearing with my little brother who was born to my stepdad. Um, started just acting weird. We were like, she never leaves the house, so why is she leaving the house now? Um, and at this time, my mum's friend was actually just horrified, like she was like, sure. She was like, that's so messed up. She's like, this is your children. This is screwed. Like, what are you doing? Kind of thing. And then, yeah, like, mum was going and meeting the stepdad. Mum was going actually meeting him and staying with him, and then within, I don't know the exact timeline, but within, I don't know, it could have been a month, could have been 6 weeks, whatever it was. That's when the conversation happened. Mum was like, he's coming back, and you're going to have to tell the police that you've lied, and you're going to have to say that you were attention seeking, because otherwise he's going to go to jail. Do you want him to be beat up? It was like the guilt and the, what about your little brother? He's not going to have a dad. I mean, I'm naive still now. I'm naive as an adult. As a child, I was even more naive, and innocent. And we're like, of course, we don't want him to get beat up. We loved this person. We loved him. He was our father. He was our father figure. He cared for us. He gave us love and affection in a messed up way. But, I mean, he was the person giving us the love of a parent. No one else was giving us love as a parent. He was the only person giving us love as a parent. So, in a really messed up way, we loved him. So that was more of a mind, like it was. Yeah, it was messed up, man. It was really messed up.
That's wild. I mean, yeah, and I mean, if I was putting myself in your shoes, your mom isn't giving you any affection or attention. She's out of the house. She's in bed, and it's from my experience, and it sounds like it's similar to yours. Like whenever you're saying like he loved us, it's like, well, when you're a child, it's almost like you don't. First of all, love is a very large word. Like there are very many things that fall under the love
Yeah,
category. Like the
yeah,
the way you love your sister different than the way you love your dad, the way you
yeah,
love singing. And so that word, like it almost has this proclivity to allow more guilt to almost like, well, you love him, right? Or well, you love this,
yeah,
don't you? So like why would you
yeah,
do
yeah,
that?
yeah. Or like you love your brother, you don't want your brother to be without a dad. Or yeah, I mean, yeah. We don't want anyone to go through, like, we don't want someone to get beaten up, like, especially not someone that we love, like, that's our father. Like, of course we don't want that,
Right.
And if that means that we have to lie so that he's okay, then sure, surely we're going to be okay. We don't know.
Right.
We don't know.
Nobody gets hurt if I lie.
Yeah,
So what's the timeline here then? I'm trying to reposition myself.
yeah. So, so from that point, that obviously got more dysfunctional because outsiders were now involved. It wasn't just in our little home knit where things were happening and no one was knowing. Now it's like mum's friend knew that had let him back in, and it was a bit weird. And my stepdad's children thought we were lying because we've just told everyone that we're lying. So we received a lot of abuse from older adult people saying how like messed up we are, and all of these things. And then my little brother is stuck in the middle of all of this as well somewhere. We just had so much going on, and then he was obviously, our stepdad was back in the house, and this was when that's obviously psychologically probably messed with us on a whole big level, that we had to just pretend as if everything was normal and happy and life was normal, and you just got a classic suppression. We just get on with it, and weirdly we kind of adapted to it. Sounds really messed up, but we just adapted to it, and there kind of became a normal dynamic.
That's
Except for
crazy.
my sister used to put things in front of the door so he couldn't get into the room, and she was living in fear.
And so
And
this
I was
was
very independent.
was that after he came back? Like at this point, you guys were like, okay, we got to kind of keep our distance from him the best we can, even though he's living under the same roof.
Yeah, I guess, like it was, yeah, I guess we just carried on living our lives and stuff like that. I was very distant and very independent and very kind of like, I obviously took on a very big kind of energy of like, you can't mess with me now because I'll mess with you kind of vibe, because he never did anything to me again. But a couple of years had passed and he actually did touch my sister again. And I think because because she was very dramatic, she was very out there, she lied a lot, and I mean, he took advantage of her character because he thought no one's going to believe her because she was like that. It was like, oh, classic Gabby. She's just lying again. It was actually unbearable sometimes how much of a drama queen she was, and I think he took advantage of that because he thought no one's going to believe her. He couldn't have done it to me again because I was too level-headed. I was too smart. I was too grown up. I was too like, you can't mess with me. So he didn't touch me again because I think he knew that if I'd have told people, they would have believed me. And my sister just went off the rails. She didn't tell anyone, but she just started being very destructive, very kind of like just crazy, very like the behavior was wild, and we just couldn't understand what was happening. But it turns out he was touching her again. Um, so at that point, so that had happened, within a couple of years of him being back. That at that point, that's when Mum got rid of him for good. So that was the end of him being in our lives as such.
Okay, let me repeat back the timeline just so I'm clear on it.
Yeah, with it.
Okay, so three, biological dad moves out, the new dad moves in. Then around ages 10 to 9, you're 10, your sister's 9. That's whenever you
8, she would have
oh,
been.
she was 8. So you were
8.
10, she was 8. That's whenever you guys realized like that this was happening, or that maybe that's about when it started.
That was when it started. Yeah,
And then you were 11, she
yeah,
was 9, and that was the first time when you guys
mm,
embraced each other, you knew it was wrong. That's whenever you kind
yeah,
of came out and were like, hey, like, this is all screwed up. Like, mom, this is what stepdad's doing. Then about
yeah,
you, I guess at that point would have filed a police report. And then a few months later, your mom starts seeing him again, tells you to lie about it. And then over the course of the next few months, stepdad moves back in. You guys are then like kind of you're putting up a little bit more of a fight to prevent it from happening. Yet within another, it sounds like 2 or 3 years, so you'd have probably been like 14 and your sister 12ish. He then
yeah.
proceeded to kind of touch her again.
Mm,
And then, so at that point in the
mm.
story, did your sister kind of come to you and tell you, and like, would you have believed her?
Actually, she would have been. It was actually around. Must have been more like years later. It was more when she was 15 because I was 17. Because what happened was I took responsibility. And when we found out, so we found out because my sister was acting out and she was being very self destructive, and she'd told the family friend. So, the original family friend who knew about it the first time, she told her. So then I found out, and what I did was I took my sister to the doctors at 17, and I said, I think my sister is narcissistic. I actually had been researching like my sister's got narcissistic personality disorder, the way that she's acting, she can't build relationships with people, like all of these things. So I like took my sister to the doctors because I was like, look, I think there's something wrong with my sister and I want to help her and protect her. And the doctor was like, why do you think your sister has got this, like these issues? And I said, I think it's because we've been abused. And at 17, you're classed as a child. So they had to ring social services. They were like, we have to like, you're a child. So we have to do something about this. It's not just like you're an adult and you can take care of this. And I
Wow.
was like, I don't care. I don't care what happens to my mum. I don't care if something bad happens to her. I need to be responsible for my younger sister and make sure she's safe.
Good for you. I mean,
Yeah.
and so then, okay, so at this point in the timeline, you're 17, she's 15. So, like, what happens with child services? Do they like come do like an investigation?
Yeah, so they come, and it's a little bit blurry. They were more concerned about my little brother because my little brother was younger and we were like, has it happened to him? Would he have? But we kind of came to the general consensus that he's done it to us because we're not his children. And we actually don't think he would have done it to his biological children. Um, but anyway, I mean, we'll never know that. But we, what happened was we were trying to get justice. So the second time round, we were trying to get it to go to. I think that the social services wanted to push it into like court and make sure that something happened. And unfortunately, they just was like, it will not hold up. That you will not. It will not hold up. You'll get ripped apart because you've said that you were attention seeking the first time round. Like you'll just get ripped apart as teenagers. Like
Shit.
they told us that straight. Like you will not hold up in court. There is no justice for you here because not only has it been years, like not only has it been years and it's your word against his, but like you said you lied the first time, so they're just going to think that you're making this up, that you're intention. And we were just like, right
Wow. I mean,
yeah,
I can take the lesson from there right there, like the power of, truth versus lying. Like it's
yeah,
fuck.
yeah. It's crazy, man. Like it's actually deep.
And I'm sure that left a little bit more of an impersonation on you as well, being told there's no judicial system justice.
I guess it was one of those confirming things of like, okay, there's no one to rely on, like authority figures. There's people who are supposed to. I just been learning so much from. Okay, mums don't protect me. Like parents, adults are not. No wonder I had a breakdown. I swear, like my whole reality was just being broken in so many ways. Like I come from being such an innocent, beautiful, creative child that just loved life, was so happy and expressionate. And I honestly, when I was a child, I loved life. I was so joyous. I'm joyous now, but I was so happy. And I mean, all children are, right? But like, I just remember loving the beauty of life and playing and butterflies and nature and sunshine. And, I just loved life so much. And I just could never have prepared myself for how shattering reality was, like really how shattering life could be. So for me, that whole process is just, yeah, it was a bit much for my sensitive soul. It was a lot. But yeah, there was no justice, no justice. And what really triggered me about that whole situation of no justice was I was also um there was also no justice for a situation that had happened when I was raped at 13. Um 13 or 14, like I can't remember exactly what age it was. I think it was 13. Um and it's the same situation. Like it came out, people told me I was a liar, I was attention seeking, and it was just like, surely not. Sure, like I think because of what had happened with my stepdad, that made the whole situation happening with the rape. It made me feel like even more like I was like, am I attention seeking? Like I actually didn't think that I'd been raped. I didn't. I didn't think that I'd been raped. Bearing in mind I was 13.
Wow.
I didn't want to have this situation happen, but this person was older than me. I was at a friend's house staying there, and again it was just that whole process of like, you're lying, you're attention seeking. And I was just like, am I? Am I attention seeking? am I lying? Is it my fault? Did I want that? That's how I lived with that, because I actually thought that I was the one in the wrong for that situation. And I don't know, that's why I started self-harming. So there we go, there's the timeline to bring you to the self-harm.
I mean, that's crazy, and that's for sure at a large scale. Because I know on like a maybe a less heavy scale, I personally know like there's ideas I've had or situations I've been myself where I it's like I can feel and I know something's true, but the outside world's like telling you something else,
Mm,
and so you have this like introspection about yourself where you're like, did I do that, or is that how that actually came off? Like, how much of that actually
yeah,
is true? Like,
mm,
am I the one that's wrong?
yeah, yeah,
And so was, and so did you say? So let's. Whew, first of all, whew. um,
yeah,
so was the self harming then after the rape at 13, or was that later? That was at 13.
yeah. I think I started self, it would make sense that it was around 14. Um, Again, I hate not knowing fact, like being like certain about these timelines, but it's such a mess. Like it's such a, you're not writing these things down in a journal. It must have been 14 because the rape would have happened when I was 13, and then because it came out like a year later.
Came out a
Um,
year later.
so yeah, and the yeah, it came as in like, so the rape happened, and then I lived with it for, I think it was like 9 months to a year. So it must have come out when I was about 14. Um, and I remember telling, it was a friend that I told first, and it was actually her who said to me, "That's rape." She was like, "What's happened to you is rape," and I was like, "What?" And she's like, "You didn't want to do it." She was like, "He's raped you," and I was like, "Oh, I don't know," like, because I wasn't screaming, and she was like, "It doesn't matter." And then that's also like, now I can understand. I mean, speak to me. I'm like a very kind of like headstrong person. When I was a teenager, if anybody ever tried to hurt me, I would do this. This is what I would do. If anybody tried to like do anything to me, I'd be like, I was very like that,
You're very
you know?
outgoing about it.
So, yeah, yeah, very kind of like I can like hold myself kind of thing. And then when I had that experience, I was very passive, very like submissive, very kind of like just didn't know. I wasn't like kicking off or angry and so then I guess like that made me feel even more so like it wasn't real, like because I was expecting that surely if it was happening, then this is how you react. Um, so yeah, the friend actually shone light on that, and that's when then I was like had to tell my parents. So yeah, that's when I told my parents. Bearing in mind this is after the abuse, and my stepdad's reaction was, it was strange. He was so angry. Like he was really angry that this had happened to me, and he was going to go and like kill this guy. And I was like, is that normal that he feels that way? Like for me, I remember thinking like, you've abused me. How are you angry? You've done the same thing as what this, like obviously what this guy had done was worse sexually. He'd been a bit more like, he's like actually raped me, but I was like, you've abused me. Like I don't get why you're so angry right now. Like it was such a weird dynamic.
I find that really fascinating you say that, because as you were telling that story in my head, I was even thinking like I thought something along the lines of like, I bet her dad or your stepdad, when he heard about this, got mad. And then you said that, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh shit.
Wow. So you picked up on that. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and let me know if this resonates with you, because this is how it hit me. Is do you think that there might have been like a feeling of, and I know this is going to sound bad, but like a feeling that like you were your stepdad's, like you belonged to him kind of thing, like he didn't want anybody
Probably.
else like hooking up with you at
Mm.
all?
Probably. I'd say so.
Some element
Probably
of
did
that.
have that kind of like attachment. Yeah, yeah. I think that that's probably quite a normal thing, like a normal thing in that situation.
Yeah.
He was very like that about my sister as well. You know,
Like there was
very like controlling.
like no boys kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Mm. I mean, I did get a boyfriend when I was about 14, 15. So was he happy about it? Probably not. He was very miserable, grumpy. I don't know if that was because I had a boyfriend, but he was like that anyway, you know?
Yeah.
He's like a miserable old man.
Um so let's keep it going. I don't
Yeah.
know a smooth way to transition into my next question, but I it's something that I really want to discuss because in my previous conversation with my the hypnotherapist and in the books that I'm reading about Journey of the Soul, they all talk about past life regression, life after life, life between lives. And I remember in your story and when we had talked, I don't even know if it's been mentioned yet in the other interviews, the earlier ones, but self harm kind of led to suicide attempts. And I believe you said that there were two. So could you walk us through when and how the first one happened?
Yeah. So if we could encapsulate then, so that whole situation between the ages of then 14 and 20, that was when I was kind of, I guess, then as well, coming into my own, learning that learning about myself and all of that. That was when I was going through life trying to learn who I am and what my place is in the world, and obviously living with all of these things. I didn't have anyone who was conscious or knew we didn't have anybody validating anything or working through these things. So I had to just show up as a normal person, a normal teenager, like my friends. And, like, I guess I started drinking actually really heavily at 14. But that's didn't feel weird because all of the other kids were doing it. So it didn't feel like I was doing that because it was weird. It just felt like I was doing that because everybody else was doing it. Actually, what I noticed is like that became a thing for me where I was using alcohol as a way to express myself. So I actually think I was an alcoholic, but like not in the way that like an alcoholic drinking every day, but a binge drinker. So I would do this a lot between that time. I started taking drugs heavily when I was like 17, 18. I started smoking weed when I was like 14 as well. So 14, drinking, smoking lots of weed, um, and just trying to figure myself out. And then that's like, I mean,
When you
in that time,
real quick, when you said you were doing
yeah.
drugs, what drugs?
So when I was 18, I started doing like, party drugs, like rave drugs, like MD, um, like ecstasy pills, cocaine, um, ketamine, like all loads of it, all of it. I was wild. I was crazy. Again, didn't feel weird because everybody was doing it. Like, didn't think it was weird. Um, so yeah, that I mean, like, there's not much to like break down in that time. I guess like there is, but there's not. Like, but that whole time between 14 and 20, that's when I kind of like was depressed, anxious. Um, I wouldn't have noticed really because I didn't understand mental health. When I was 18, I remember that was like the biggest. Do you remember when I was telling you before about like having, like that reality smashed of like the world? I remember when I was 18, that was like, for me, it was so difficult to then, I'm an adult now and I have to look after myself. And I'd never been parented really, like not functionally. So I had to be this adult, and that was really tough for me. Really tough. I really struggled with being an adult because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know how to be an adult. Um, so yeah, I think that was probably the start of really when I started getting really like more depressed, more dark, more hopeless, more going into those really lower states of consciousness, lack of no return, and then the drugs, the alcohol not helping, my ability to not process my own feelings or emotions, not even understand my own mental health. I think that's then obviously what led to the breakdown. And then I had a mental breakdown when I was 20. And I mean, it's beautiful because it's kind of like obviously all of that had happened for the past however long has just got too much, and my body's just broken. It's just been too much, and I've broken out of it. I needed to have the breakdown to break through it all. Um, the breakdown came at 20. I was very intoxicated, of course, as always. Um, and yeah, I mean, I thought about suicide a lot. I was very depressed, very dark, very kind of like miserable and just low energy, Like I wasn't a good person to be around. Like I actually even had a friend that said to me, I can't be your friend anymore because you're too depressed. And I was like, right, that feels like a good time to not be my friend. Like very victim mindset.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, first of all, to even be able to acknowledge, like, and that's an interesting thing about the idea of depression and really trauma in general, right? They're so linked together. Of how do you know that something was, and this is an issue I had for a while. Is like I didn't really even realize that, like, though minor compared to you, it's like I didn't even realize like that this sexual trauma was trauma until I was like 25. Or like you're saying,
Mm,
like if you're always in a depressed state, how do you know that that's depression? Like how can we, and that makes the mental health conversation so difficult of, okay, well,
yeah.
this is depression versus like this is how you should feel. It's like, well, okay, should's a weird word, but like, like here's what depression feels like, here's what happiness feels like. It's like
Mm.
discussing even something like that feels like so difficult to even to begin the mental health conversation.
And people judge you because one day you're okay and you can show up and you're doing normal things, and then I was judged because like my partner at the time, he was like, I couldn't get out of bed, and you're just lazy, why are you not getting out of bed and doing things? And I'd be like, I don't know, but like this feels worse, like why are you calling me lazy? I can't, I don't have any energy to move. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but like you calling me lazy doesn't feel helpful. But people would judge you because I could still go out and be social and have like normal. I guess from the outside, it would be like you seem to be fine to me. People are like you look like you're doing fine. Like people are so judgmental. Like you can't be depressed. You look fine. You're fine. You look at you. You're fine. You're out here having a drink with us, and it's like that feels more like you're alone because you're kind of like, well, no one understands like you can't explain it. Explain then how you're doing that, but still feeling so dark.
And I think something that probably also occurs is along the lines of like, where like maybe your friends in that situation also had their own issues and maybe they weren't even in like the best place of happiness or knowing what true happiness feels like, because that's something I've realized is whatever you're putting out in the world, it's going to give it back to you. So if you're kind of in a dark place yourself, you're not going to be attracting like the most, let's say, enlightened people. You're going to be attracting people
Mm.
who are roughly a similar energetic vibe.
Reflecting it 100%. And now I look back and I'm like, actually, that partner really struggled. His mum had like lots of bad mental health. He had, it's like what you said, but we're all unconscious of that. Like, who's conscious of all of that stuff when you're going through it? It's like you're actually just surrounded by a lot of traumatized people, and no one knows what's going on. Everybody's traumatized and everybody's depressed and anxious and like, but no one knows.
Right.
you know.
Right.
So that's yeah. Yeah, so that's what led to the breakdowns, and that was my breaking point. And it was bound to happen. I guess it was inevitable that it was going to happen because I'd been taking a lot of drugs, and I was very I actually got drug induced psychosis,
What's
um,
that?
which was it's like psychosis, but like I'd got it from the drugs that I was taking. So I basically, if I would have carried on, I would have got schizophrenia. I would have
Oh,
lost my mind. yeah, so I started to see things. I started to hear voices. I started to be very paranoid and very like scared. Um, I actually, because I was brought up a Catholic, I actually had this heightened sense of God and devil. And when I went to the doctor, at this point, I was pretty scared. I was hearing voices and stuff, like seeing things, shadows, and I was pretty scared. And I went to the doctor and I was like, like I'm scared. Like I feel something's. I think that I'm like pushing the boundaries of something. I'm a bit worried, and I just told the doctor straight. I was like, she asked me straight up, like, "Are you taking drugs?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm taking all of these drugs." I told her everything that I was taking, and she was like, "It sounds like." I was like, "I'm so scared because I think the devil's trying to get me," and she was like. It sounds like you've just heightened because you heightened the sense of God, but you've also, like, with God comes devil. So it's like you've heightened both of those because I was very started to get a bit more like obsessed with like religion and like, is God going to save me? Like, I don't know. But I was scared. I actually, at the time, this is scary, but like, I felt like the devil was watching me. I was creating that reality of like there was a demons watching me through the window. I was so fucking scared. Like I can't even express to you how scared I was. Um, and it was so. And I mean, we know about energy, right? I don't believe. Sorry, I don't believe in religion, God. Now, just to quote unquote, I'm just gonna say that, and we could dig into that next. But I I was feeling this energy. I was feeling dark energy around me. I was petrified. And I felt like every turn something was getting me, and I started to see black shadows flying. I could hear the word, my name, Josephine. And it wasn't, I mean, I don't know, it was obviously me creating that voice, but it felt separate from me. And I was tripping out, but I was still taking drugs. I actually stopped smoking weed when I was 18 because of this, because I was paranoid, so paranoid. And it was too much. I was losing my mind.
Wow. um,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean that's crazy, and it really brings me to an understanding of like reality and what we constitute as being real, or what we constitute
yeah,
as being a what is real, because to you those things were real. Like
they were real.
I
Yeah.
like it's like in your the way you kind of phrase that is like that you feel like you were kind of, let's say, making it up, but I personally don't know. I mean, energies are everywhere, and your outside world's a reflection of your inside world. And so if your inside world was, I mean, to put it as light as possible, but like kind of as much negative energy or heavy and dark energy that you were holding on to, it wasn't being processed, it wasn't being let out. And so this was like,
Mm.
in my opinion, a way that your subconscious was creating this, I don't
Yeah.
know, this reality on this.
No, it is.
Yeah. And so, I mean,
It's exactly what it was.
yeah, just because I guess, and here's the weird thing is like, just because other people didn't see it doesn't mean that it wasn't real.
No, it was real for me, 100%. Like that darkness was real. I was experiencing it on a real level. Now I can see it was a projection of the darkness that was within me. I can see that now.
And so was this kind of like a part of the darkness that pushed you towards the first suicide attempt?
Yeah, yeah. I yeah, I couldn't live with myself. I didn't, I was hopeless. I actually, for me, suicide was the idealistic ideal kind of thing. It was like that. It was almost like a relief. It was like, this is going to be better. I'm going to be free of suffering. I'm going to be happy. So for me, this felt like I actually convinced myself that this was like hell, and that we were living in hell, and actually it would be better for me to get out of here. Now I see that it's just, we construct our own realities. But for me, that's it, just pushed me to the edge. I was just like, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to do this. Life is too hard. It's too heavy. I'm done. Get me a ticket out of here. I can't deal with it. I can't cope. because I was a mess. Like I couldn't tolerate the emotion, the build up, the not knowing how to regulate myself, my nervous system, all of these things. Like I just would be crying in such a like it was like sobbing, and I would just be sobbing my heart out constantly, like I was just so heavy with emotions and trauma, and it was like it's just bound to happen, isn't it, when you think about it, when you get to it's like a pressure point of like it needs to release. So yeah, I did try to take my own life, and I the experience was crazy because I was in an apartment by myself, a uni flat, and I was very intoxicated. And I'd taken all of these tablets. No, the first time I wasn't intoxicated. Sorry, that was the second time. The first time I wasn't intoxicated. I just took loads and loads and loads of tablets. I'd been saving up all of my tablets, all of my medication, preparing for it. So calculated. But I'd been saving up all of my antidepressants, all of my antipsychotics, all of these like tablets that I could take, paracetamol, just all of these like pretty strong tablets. And I was like, I'm just gonna take them all. And actually, I mean, after researching, you can't really kill yourself on tablets. Like it's very hard to do. I didn't know this, so I've just ruined my body. But I took so many. I took probably about 300 tablets. So I took a lot of tablets. Um, yeah, it was a lot, and I put myself obviously unconscious because of that. Like, I mean, you
What
take a drug
tablet?
cocktail like that,
What drugs were just random tablets? There were a bunch of different
just
stuff.
paracetamol. Yeah, just paracetamol, antidepressants, like all of the antidepressants that I'd been building up over the time. I had so many different ones. Um, yeah, just so many different, just random stuff, like just codeine, anything that like anything that I had, basically. Um, and yeah, I was messaging my partner at the time, like, the very classic, I'm sorry, I love you, I'm leaving now. It was kind of like obviously very alarming. And he drove, obviously in a panic, to get me. And when he got there, obviously the door was locked. He had to get someone to break it in. And then he dragged me. He said that my body was like a dead weight, and he was dragging me across the ground to the hospital, basically. And I was saying, so he told me this after. I was saying, they're here now. They're here now. Weird as fuck. So I was completely in this white space, and all I remember was these black figures, like really kind of like tall black figures. They're just like warped almost. Just loads of black figures around me. Like just I don't know what they were or who they were or what it was, or I was just interpreting that energy that way. Um but I just remember that he was just saying that. I kept saying, they're here now, they're here now, they're here now. He was like obviously pretty scared by that. Um, I genuinely believe that like that process, because I went unconscious then, I don't remember anything. I just came back round and I was in a hospital bed and I was like surrounded by people. I don't know what happened, but I think that that transition, whatever happened, was me, I guess, being met by my spirit guides or being met by my higher self, or like I think that something very profound happened there where I remembered. So I remembered who I am, what I'm here to do. I kind of connected back to my spirit. I feel that way. Like that's because I came back in feeling very like different almost, but like still. I mean, within 2 weeks, I tried to commit suicide again, but like that's because I think that I was let down by the people around me. Like I was let down by like no one was trying to help me still. So I think that's what led me to the suicide again. Within 3 weeks, I think. 3 weeks later, I was back.
So I'm really interested in kind of what you experienced during the whole thing, right? I mean, so we know like what happened on the 3D realm. Let's say like you're the person you were seeing at the time came, got you, took you to the hospital. So from your recollection, you said you weren't intoxicated, but you just took all these pills, and then did you just pass out, and then these big black figures kind of appear just around you? Is that kind of the process?
Yeah, I remember my partner at the time dragging me across the ground, and all I remember was I was half unconscious, and it was just white. Everything was white, like a bright, like a light, like a very bright light. But then there was just like these black figures, like uh, around, like just appearing around me.
Were they like as you
And I
were being
remember,
pulled through the hallway, the black figures were beside you?
no, it was when I was being pulled like into, I was on the grass, so I was being pulled into the hospital. So I was just outside the hospital. Like it was very like, like I was unconscious. I was going between being outside the hospital to, like tripping out into this white space with these black figures.
Okay. And then so this happened again within a couple weeks. Was that a very similar experience?
No, so what happened was I was sent home within 3 days. So 3 days
Oh
later, I
wow.
was sent home because I was in a hospital bed that needed, and the doctor, no word of a lie, the doctor said, I'm sorry, you can't take up this bed because you're not, nothing's wrong with you. Nothing's physically wrong with you. I'm not joking, no word of
Mm.
a lie. That's what he said to my dad. He was like, she can't take up this space because we need it for people who have got something wrong with them. And there was no space in a mental bed or anything like that. So they were like, you're going to have to go home. So I was sent home. Don't ask me why my family weren't there, like why no one took me into that. Maybe I rejected it. I can't remember, but I went back into my apartment where it had all happened.
By
And of
yourself.
course, I mean, yeah, by myself, by myself. I mean, people were coming to visit but no one was with me. Um, no one was with me. I was alone again. So it was just, it almost was like, oh, that's just happened. And I've just gone straight back into it. I don't know. Like, of course I'm going to do it again because, like, I felt so unsupported. I felt so alone. I felt like no one's hearing me. No one's hearing or seeing me. Like, what's going on? Um, but the second time was so much more dysfunctional because I went to I shouldn't have been drinking. I went to a Christmas party and I was open bar and I got absolutely intoxicated, of course. But someone had actually come up to me and was like, do you know your partner's been cheating on you? And I was like, I'd
Jeez.
already found, yeah, I'd already found evidence of him on FaceTime naked to this girl that he worked with. He told me that it was like, none of that was real, basically. Like it wasn't, he'd not done anything, and we worked for it. And someone come up to me and was like, he has been. My partner's told me because he's friends, and he has been cheating on you, basically. As you can imagine, my state, I'm in a very fragile state of mind. I just drunk so much more alcohol. I got so intoxicated, it was ridiculous. Like, it was bad, it was dangerous how much I got intoxicated. And then I ended up like messaging this person, and I was like invited this random guy to my house, obviously trying to be, I don't know what happened, but I then nearly slept with this guy. Luckily became quite conscious, and he I kicked him out, and I was like, I don't want to do this, like, get out. And I think then that guilt of what I just like, because then I was like, oh my God, I've just done what I'm so upset about that he's done. And I was just obviously just a mess, I was just messed up, like just not okay, not functional. And I then basically carried on drinking more and more. Then I took loads more tablets. So I just took loads more tablets with the alcohol then, because then at this point they'd prescribed me antipsychotics, prescribed me, they'd given me more tablets. So I had loads
Jeez.
more tablets.
Jeez.
So it was amazing because I was like, yes, I've got loads more tablets. I'd carried on getting the tablets, thinking this is for my next time.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I was idolizing it. I honestly was having like a fantasy about this is what I'm going to do next. At this point, I was searching how to actually make it work. So then I was searching, you had to make a chemical concoction, it had to be, different. And I was putting a lot of planning into this because I was like, this time I'm going to do it. So then that all happened. But this time I rang my cousin, and she came and got me. And then, I just woke up again in this hospital bed with my cousin next to me. And yeah, it was crazy.
Well, real
It was
real
mad.
quick, there's a quick jump there. So
Yeah,
did you take the pills and then call your cousin, or did you call your cousin then take the pills?
yeah. No, I took the pills, then called my cousin.
And
Yeah,
and so then you called your cousin, and then was like, did those dark figures show up again? Like, what do you
no,
remember from the transition?
I just was completely unconscious then. So, but by the time she got me, I started to, like lose consciousness. Um, and then the next time I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Um, so yeah, I don't remember anything that happened. Then I was completely unconscious.
Wow.
Um, yeah,
And so what was when you woke up in the hospital bed, what was like the process like at that point? Was it like, this is the second suicide
you know,
attempt? Are we gonna
yeah,
actually
this
help
was the
this girl
second
now?
suicide. Yeah, that was the second suicide attempt. So at this point, obviously, people are a bit more. I mean, a psychologist came to see me, and the psychologist is, speaking to me. And I remember the psychologist leaving the room, and no word of a lie, I tried to hang myself.
Oh
I
wow.
tried to, I put a chair in front of the thing, and I tried to hang myself. I couldn't get high, but I just was strangling myself to the point of like, I was like kind of losing consciousness, but I was like, this is not going to work. And then and then I would just sit there, and then I would be thinking, how can I kill myself? Then I left the hospital. No joke. I left the hospital. No one knew. No one knew. I walked out of the hospital in my nightgown, and I walked onto a road because I was going to kill myself. I was going to jump in front of a car. I was gone for, I'd say, about 2 hours, and I was walking the streets looking like a crazy person. I was in this like dressing gown, and I was just like, I'm going to jump in front of a car. And then I was like, no, that's selfish. Like, what about the person? I was like, I'm going to jump off a bridge. That's the way that I'm going to do it. And I was walking the streets thinking, this is like, no one cares about me. No one even cares that I'm gone. That's what I was thinking. Obviously, all I wanted was just to be held. I just wanted someone to just come, take me, and say, I hear you. I love you. I've got you. Let's work through this. But it didn't happen. But the psychologist, I went back, and the psychologist kind of was like, I don't want to put you in a mental hospital because if I put you in there, it's a very difficult road to recover. It will be worse because you're around more people who are, he obviously could see that maybe I'm going to get through this, and maybe he's seen a light that I didn't see because he actually was like, I really don't want you to go into a hospital with a mental hospital because I just feel that will make you worse. You'll be surrounded by people who are really mental, and you'll become that environment. Thank God. Thank God that I didn't, because I don't think I would be here right now. Maybe I don't know if I'd be the same person. That was a reality that was there, and I didn't step into it. Thank God.
That's wild. And they didn't even notice that you had left the hospital for 2 hours?
No.
So what got you to so in your story, you were in your nightgown walking down the street. You were like, okay, maybe I should jump out in front of a car. No, that's selfish. I should just go and jump off a bridge. What what made you pivot from the bridge to I'll just go back to the hospital?
Deep down, I just wanted to be helped. I didn't want to be unhappy. I wanted to believe that like I could be fixed, I guess, in some way. Deep down, my higher self, obviously, my higher self knew that I could get better, So there was a small glimpse of hope amongst it all, I guess. There was a small glimpse of like a future. Maybe maybe someone can help me get through this, you know? maybe. I'm still hopeful.
And so
I
that's,
don't know how.
well, I mean, it looks like you're doing it right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so that was kind of the epiphany I guess you had, is that you just had this feeling of like, okay, there's not like anything wrong with me. It's just that I need some sort of almost empathy or validation that like what I'm going through is what it is
yeah,
almost.
yeah. I just need someone to fix it. I just need someone to come in and tell me what's going on. That's it.
Man, that's crazy. I mean, I guess crazy is a weird word for it, but that's it's one of a
It
kind.
is crazy.
Yeah.
It is. It's wild. It's a mad story, and it's like fantastic in a way because it's like led me to every. Without that story, would I be me right now? Absolutely not. I would not be JoZen, Josephine. I wouldn't be the Josephine I am today, like helping other people with consciousness and just my experience. So I really wanted to be a mental health advocate because I felt like it was so messed up. I felt like the whole thing was so messed up.
Who better to talk about
Um,
it?
like I actually felt so qualified. I actually though was like, psychology is messed up. Like, sorry, it's not for everyone. I don't think it. Like, I don't want to just sound savage here. I don't know if you follow the holistic psychologist. I love her. I love the way that she does psychology. Have you heard of her?
Um,
Holistic?
no,
No?
maybe if I saw it.
Maybe you've seen her post. But to me, I started to see that this whole system was corrupt in a way that was like, this is not supportive for people. Because actually, I stopped taking the medication and I stopped doing all of those things. And I started doing things like meditation and, the classic story of like finding the holistic healing. That's what truly healed me, you know?
Well, that's beautiful. So, what
So
did that journey look like? Because that's something that I'm kind of always fascinated about, where it's like, I kind of have this warped perception of, the medical industry, I think, where I see them as more in a business to cure or no, to
a
treat.
business,
Yeah, they're more
yeah,
of a business to
to
treat than to
treat.
cure.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, it, how did you kind of come to realize, or how did you kind of come to process that, okay, these drugs aren't really doing it for me, and that there's something that I need to go within and heal myself from within, because I, Josephine, have that power?
Yeah,
How did you find that?
yeah. So after all that whole experience, I then, I was, oh, that's why. I tell you what happened. From that second suicide, I obviously then the new Josephine was birthed to a degree. I quit my job, quit uni, split up with my boyfriend of 3 years, and I booked a one-way flight to Australia.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah. So within that second time of suicide, within I'd say 2 months, I was in Australia. So obviously a higher self thing here. They actually I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder after that second attempt. So I went and seen a psychiatrist, all of that. They diagnosed me with emotionally unstable personality disorder, um, which, believe it or not, they just gave me more medication for.
Of course.
I I actually refused the medication, and they had somebody coming out to my house every day to make sure that I was okay. So they had like somebody, like a risk assessment kind of person coming out and making sure that I was not committing suicide, basically. Um, and in that time, I was like, I'm going to go to Australia. Of course, they were like, that's very impulsive. Impulsivity is a trait of emotionally unstable personality disorder. So they was like,
Oh my
um,
gosh.
yeah. So you can imagine. I'm like, I don't want your tablets. I'm moving to Australia. I've booked a one-way flight. Everyone's like, we don't think this is a good idea. Like, this is not good. You've just tried to kill yourself, and now you're jumping on a plane to Australia, like on your own. Like, no, you can imagine, and my higher self is like, nah, I know myself, I'm doing this, I'm going to be fine, this is the way. And it was so healing for me because I just broke free from all of this construct of, I wasn't exactly completely healed, but like no one was stopping me. No one was stopping me going from Australia. And it was so liberating. I felt so much happiness, so much joy. That moment of being on a plane and touching down in Australia, I remember feeling so excited, so happy. I'd not felt that for so long, like, and I just was like, it's probably why I'm so passionate about travel right now. But it's like, I just was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be free like this. I want to travel and be free. And I wasn't healed. I still was doing very dysfunctional things when I was in Australia, partying a lot. And I mean, this is a surely a whole of a podcast. It's like, surely my life after this is a whole it's a whole of a podcast, because from there then I started doing like sex work. Then I started doing like mad stuff like this, being wild, still doing drugs. Like, my life was just crazy from then on. But I was also like on a spiritual, I'd had my awakening. So I started to learn about like how I create my own reality, and it was all very like intertwined, and it was very like ascension from there.
That's beautiful. I mean,
Yeah, it was
so
amazing.
then were you, I guess, so you weren't doing like meditating, you weren't doing any sort of, let's say, spiritual work before you got to Australia. And so there was like this divine feeling of one-way ticket, drop everything, one-way ticket Australia?
You know what? I actually think it's amazing how it's so divine, all of this happening. Is when I was in hospital the second time, a friend, the same friend that couldn't be my friend because I was depressed, she'd left. She was my best friend for like years. She actually came to the hospital. I'd not seen her in years. And she came to the hospital and she gave me the secret. She just gave me the secret. And I remember at the time thinking, why are you giving me a book? Like, I've just tried to kill myself. I don't care about a book right now. Like, I remember thinking that. Anyway, it was divine, because their secret is obviously like starts to teach you about law of attraction. So when I first started reading that book in Australia, because I didn't read it straight away, I started to read it in Australia. Instantly it started to resonate, of like, it's almost like my higher self had just placed all of these things in my path, and it was all divine and aligned. Because then I started instantly, when I read that your thoughts create your reality, it's almost like a whole activation just happened. I was like, whoa. I was like, whoa. I was like, oh. And then more and more I started to see how, oh, I just created that depression myself to a degree. I've just constructed a dark reality because of my own thoughts and feelings. So yeah, absolutely wild. It was. So I started to read The Secret. So The Secret was the kind of like the catalyst for me understanding law of attraction. And I did start to meditate and be great. I started to be grateful. So I started to write gratitude journals and little things like this.
And the snowball effect kind of probably just started happening, where life just started kind of getting
Well,
better.
that's it then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things start getting better.
And in a way, and maybe this is kudos to you, because in a way this is kind of validating everything for me, because for me, I look at things at like the most extreme. Like, I truly believe if you have an idea, like, take it to the most extreme, see if it works. Either way, right? And I feel like that usually kind of can show you where the guardrails or where the barriers of that idea exist, right? For me, like a big one recently was like the idea of manifestation, where if there was zero manifestation, like it wasn't a thing, then there would be no change at all whatsoever in the world, and everything would be stagnant, and you would just be laying in bed 24/7. But if manifestation was instantaneous, it would be such a chaotic world where Josephine and I would never be able to have this conversation, right? We would be teleporting to such different locations every time we talked about it, or like it came up as our
All of the
thoughts,
time.
right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's huge kudos to your story, where if somebody who can be somebody who attempted suicide arguably 3 times, maybe three and a half, it depends on how you want to count it. You have seen this kind of stuff firsthand, of that the world creates your reality. Like, you're at a point now where
Yeah.
you are a rape victim, a sexual trauma survivor, And I mean, I guess those are weird, interesting words in themselves, but you've battled through all these things, and yet you're now at a point where you're like, yeah, I quote unquote created all of that.
Yeah, I legit, obviously, I probably didn't like that idea initially, but I could start to see how I'd created the depression, I'd created that construct. And I mean, we can never understand as a child why we attract these kind of things into our life, right? We never can. Maybe I was supposed to, or maybe it was the predisposition of like being into, I'd come into my parent. I chose my parents. My parents are pretty low vibrational in a way. They're living, so it's like I'm kind of like naturally going to experience what they're experiencing. So it's like the dog. Don't start
You
a dog.
heard it.
Yeah, I
She'll
heard
be
it.
getting a sec.
Yeah. It's all right. I actually needed to put the charger in as well. It's like, oh, we
I
were
heard a
doing
little
so
bit. I
well.
was like,
No,
what's
it's
going
good.
on?
Yeah. It's like, no, but I guess it's like the light feels like it's entered back in. Yeah. So as I started going on this journey, more and more things were happening where I was being faced with myself. So a lot of self-awareness was starting, like a lot of things were starting to like reflect, I guess, back to me. And I had to sit, like, I guess I had to like just learn about myself in such a big way. Um, it's crazy how quickly that went, actually. But one of really kind of like momental times I remember was I was very still victim mentality, victim consciousness, and I was entitled, like very entitled as fuck. Like I thought that the whole world owed me something. So I was surrounded by a lot of people who'd not experienced anything along the lines of what I'd experienced. And as you can imagine, when I'm partying with them and stuff, they would drink, it would be cool, it would be chill. I would drink, I'd start expressing all of this deep, dark stuff that I've still kind of got within my psyche, and I would be a mess, emotionally a mess. And people would just be like, that's a bit much, Joe. Like, so these things were still happening, like I would binge drink and I would, I'd be trying to express myself through the alcohol. And it got to a point where then I was like, why are my friends not asking me how I am? Why are my friends not checking in on me every single day? And, I was living with these people and I actually had a bit of a shock to my reality because every single friend, and I needed it clearly, sat me down separately and was like, look, you're very self-absorbed. Like you're just stuck in your own head. You don't care about us. You don't care about like what's going on. Like you just think that we're here to serve you in a way, like that because you've had a bad life, that it's that entitlement feeling. Um and I was just like, that's actually when a book came into my life, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. One of the best books ever for self-awareness. Absolutely love it. I tell everybody to read it. And he talks about, people who have bad stuff happen to them, they think that like it's then everybody else's problem. And I remember just that whole, I was like, oh, like I'm actually the problem here. Like it was experience after experience where it's like I'm the issue, like not an issue, but like I'm the one
I'm
that's
creating
like,
this.
if you don't like this, yeah, I'm creating this. Yeah, in a way, yeah, I'm creating this. And more was happening where it was like I had to be responsible for that. So yeah, I really kind of went on. Obviously, there's so much that happens, in that. It's like you can't just explain that all of that progression in a conversation, but there were so many layers to it. And I really kind of transcended so many layers in a really kind of transformative way. I was very real with myself. And when I started to be honest with myself, I was like, okay, self-awareness is like the best thing. Like if I can be really self-aware, I'm going to get through life pretty well. And I started to really practice that. So I think it's the best practice that anybody could do, is being very self-aware. Because then you start to create much better circumstances. Like I live my dream life and I'm like, oh, it's actually amazing how I've gone from like this to this. It's like, whoa.
Right.
because of that knowing.
I mean, if there's anyone that has really changed their life, let's say, from you could argue from hell to heaven. You know, I think it's you.
And I think that's why I so passionately want to be of service and help people, because I'm like, I know for a fact anybody can transform. Like, I know it because I've done it. It's not like I'm just giving you some textbook thing. Like, I'm not just saying this because like it sounds cool. I've done it.
You've lived it.
I've done the process. I've lived it. I've gone through the journey, and I've been suicidal. I've tried to kill myself, and now I'm living in pure bliss. Like, go figure, it's possible for every single person, you know?
I love
Just
it.
got to jump a timeline. It's like it's there.
Just a quick little timeline shift.
Yeah, that's it. Easy as.
I think that that's a beautiful, and I think it's the perfect way to wrap this up.
It really is.
I think
It's beautiful. It's perfect. It
is
is. I
is
agree.
there anything that you want to, I'll give you the floor for a bit. I'll throw your information in the description below, but is there anything you want
Yeah.
to encourage people to do? Any words of advice? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, like if there's something you don't like about your reality, go inwards. If it's relationships, if something doesn't reflect in your reality that you enjoy or love or like, then it's something internal. Like, always. There is literally nothing that you're not creating. You're creating every cell and atom is being created by you and how you're feeling about the world and your perceptions of the world. So yeah, just if you want to create a heaven on earth, your heaven on earth, just be intentional about everything that you're doing and create it, because you can.
Beautiful words.
That's what I want to say. Yeah.
Josephine, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your story. Appreciate you sharing your story with the conscious monkeys, and I'm glad we finally got it all out.
Yeah.
uh,
I hope it helps. I hope it helps people. I really do.
yeah, I it helped me at the very least. It helped me see some things in a different light, and so yeah, I mean, take that for what it's worth. But yeah, a couple more people, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will.
We have to do another one now, Clayton, about like just being conscious. Surely.
Now, yeah, we got a whole thing coming after this.
Yeah, we've got a whole thing, a sequel.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for holding space
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and being patient. Being patient.
it's been a big one.
It's been big. Yeah, really grateful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you. Yeah, holding space is huge. I mean, it's hard. I guess it's hard to do nowadays, but anyone can do that as well. I know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so thank you, Josephine, again. Conscious Monkeys, if you want to get in contact with Josephine, ask her any questions, links below. So go check her out. If you made it through, I mean, pat yourself on the back, because that was a deep conversation. You're patting yourself. Oh my gosh. But yeah, everyone should be patting themselves on the back.
We made
We
it.
made it. With that being said, if you guys have listened to all this, thank you. I know it was a little chaotic, but I think that's kind of where the beauty lies. And, if not everything's perfect. So take that for what it is. Josephine, thanks again. Conscious Monkeys, go check her out in the links below. I have nothing to add. Josephine wrapped it up perfectly. With that being said, Conscious Monkeys, let's grow together.